Shalom and welcome to Brit Am Messianic Synagogue's Tuesday night Bible study. I'm glad that you're all here. I'm glad those that are watching online are with us. And we're starting a new study tonight on the book of Romans in context. We've done previously the book of Revelation in context. We've done the book of Colossians in context. And now we're doing the book of Romans in context. We've done Galatians also. So Colossians, Galatians, and Revelations. Now we're doing the book of Romans. We want to begin with prayer. We always do. Please remember to pray for Robin and Fred, for Kirsten, who had a knee surgery and had some reaction to the medicine and stuff, and just had some issues that came up with that. Pray for Timothy, for Jim, for Rabbi Wayne, for Rabbi Joe Bell, who's getting ready to start a new treatment to keep diminishing his cancer. For Aaron, we're praying for Aaron to get a new place to live, so please be praying for that. And if you're in house and you happen to know somebody in the Pensacola area that has a small rental unit or even a little suite in their house, sometimes you have a bedroom and bathroom kind of separate area, one of those that is available, please let us know so we can let Aaron know about that. Also, please pray for my Aunt Barbara, who's actually my cousin's aunt. So I'm not sure what that makes her to me. I've always called her Aunt Barbara. So I'm not sure how that works with families and all that, but she's Aunt Barbara. And she fell and broke her hip. And they did surgery to put it back together today. So she's in a lot of pain and discomfort, and we just want to pray for her. So if you're watching online and you have a prayer request, just put it in the comment bar, and then after the Bible study, we'll look at it. We'll be praying with your need and for your need also. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, we thank you so much that you are not only our King who is sovereign over all things, but you're our Father. Because we have that relational connection, you know our hurts, you know our desires, you know our heart, you know what we are involved with, you know those people that we care about, and we pray for these needs to be touched and answered, for people to be healed and delivered, for blessings to be provided. And Abba, we want to pray also for our nation and also for Israel. We want to pray against the COVID virus, and that it would be just driven into the sea. And we ask for shalom for our nation in Yeshua's name. Amen. I wanted to also say a couple of things just announcement-wise. This Saturday morning, George and Rivka Witten will be with us. George will be sharing the word, and his wife, Bat Rivka, will be leading our worship. So it's going to be a unique service there from Arad, Israel. And I know that they've been here before and have been a blessing. I know there'll be a blessing when they come this time. And so you can check them out. Bat Rivka's website is Lazman Hazem Music. So you can visit there and listen to her music. You can also go to Worthy News, which is a website that George runs, which deals with worldwide news concerning Israel and the body of Messiah. So that's coming up. We also have what else we have? Oh, t-shirts or shirts. For those that want, we have a new logo. For those that don't know what it is, it's a bait, and inside the bait is an ayin for Brit Am. And I have friends who say, why are you calling it Brit Am instead of Brit Ami or Brit or Ha-Brit or Brit Ha'am, which would be more correct Hebrew. You would say Brit Ami, which would be my covenant people, or Brit Ha'am, the covenant people. And there's a reason for that. And I know it's not perfect Hebrew, but we're not his only covenant people. So we didn't want to say, we're the covenant, it's just us, the Brit Amians. We're the only covenant people. So we didn't want to do that. And we're not, so we didn't want to say my, as if we were the only ones. And we didn't want to say because we're not the only ones. So, but you'll notice that the ayin is inside, because the beit is for Brit, which means covenant, and we're the Am, the people within the covenant, and also Beit Knesset, or the synagogue in Hebrew, we're the people inside the synagogue. So both figurative ways of saying that, so that's why that is. These shirts are available. We're not doing this as a fundraiser. We're not making any money off of it at all. If you want a shirt and you're in Pensacola, you can just go to Ruth's Uniform Shop on Olive Road and just tell them you're with Brit Am, and they'll let you pick out a shirt, and they'll put the logo on. They'll either put it on the front like this, or they'll put it on your arm. I know some of the ladies want it on their arm because that way people won't be staring at this location to find out what it's saying. So you can get it on your arm, or you can get it here, whichever way, but just go to Ruth's. They have it all set up, and it's about $24, $25 for a golf shirt like this with the logo on it. So that's that.
What's the name again?
Ruth, R-U-T, like Ruth in the Bible. Ruth's Uniform Shop, R-U-T-H. Ruth's, and then if you're not local and you want one, you can just email us at info@britam.org, and we'll make arrangements to get one sent to you, and you can have one for you there. I saw your hand was up real quick, Sam.
I was just wondering if there was going to be an opportunity to pre-purchase music from...
We're figuring that out. They're going to be here Friday afternoon sometime, or Friday evening. What we're hoping is that they'll come back and we'll have a get-together with them at Havdalah, so that people that want to purchase music can do that. That's normally what we try to do with people from outside. We don't sell on Shabbat. So they'll be here Saturday morning with us. We're hoping they'll be able to come and have a meet and greet and coffee time and Havdalah together, and then and that. And they'll also be at Freedom Church Sunday morning. So that's another opportunity that you can have for that. Yes. They'll be here for Rosh Chodesh Saturday night, which is this Saturday night, I've just been told. So look, I do really well just to remember what today is. If I can go through today, it's funny, and this doesn't have anything to do with the Roman study, but I don't make my own schedule. For years, every present I got from anybody was some kind of date or a telephone notebook. You know, the things with the peel-off notes for schedule. And that was the only gifts I got from anybody, because I'm really good at misscheduling. And so one time I had two weddings and a service to teach at in 3 different states at the same time. Thankfully, the weddings canceled or rescheduled, and I was able to. But so since then, my wife makes all of our personal appointments, and Robin makes all the synagogue appointments, and they just put it on my phone. And in the morning, I look at my phone and I say, oh, so that's what I'm doing today. And that way I don't have those kind of crises and problems with that. So anyhow, we're going to study the book of Romans. We'll be studying this probably through the new year on the Greco-Roman calendar. And so it's going to go Tuesday nights on. There are going to be at least 1 or 2 Tuesdays. One that I know of for sure that I won't be here. And there'll be somebody else that teaches that week, and then we'll continue on afterwards. I know there were 2, but they canceled our cruise in December. So we'll be here for that week. Okay, so let's dig into Romans. And I do want to ask somebody, because I like to be respectful of time. So we're going to start when we did at 6:30. We're going to stop at 7:30. So if I'm still talking just before 7:30, someone with a watch, do that, and I'll know that I need to stop. Okay. So the book of Romans is an interesting book. It's unique in a number of ways. It's unique because we really do know about when it was written. Some of the other books we kind of guess within a space of time, But the book of Romans was written somewhere between 57 and 59 CE. We know it was written about that time. It was more than likely written by Paul or Shaul while he was in Corinth. And written to them. It's also unique in that the congregation, the Kehillah of Rome, was not started by somebody from Israel going out as a shaliach or an apostle, but it was started by believers in Rome. More than likely, people from Rome that were there on Shavuot in Acts 2 or somewhere around there that got filled with the Ruach, accepted Yeshua as the Messiah, and went back to Rome. And it was kind of a indigenous move of God that was connected to the believers, but it wasn't started because somebody from Jerusalem went out as a shaliach, as an emissary. You know, we use the word apostle in Brit Chadashah, New Covenant writings, and unfortunately, as time goes on, words transition in meanings. And so the word apostle in modern times has gotten this new meaning of being a super important person who is more than a pastor or a bishop. And so they get this bigger title and a different robe to wear. But that's not what the meaning of it is. It really just means someone who's sent. What we would term a missionary more accurately today. It's just somebody that had a call on their life that was recognizable, and they received smicha or ordination or the laying on of hands, and they were sent out to go somewhere to either start a congregation or minister to a congregation or even just be at a congregation to deal with some kind of a crisis. Romans was not started in that way. It was started, as I said, indigenously. There's a lot of things that went on in Rome. The Jewish people were exiled from Rome not long after this book is written because of a disagreement between the Romans and the Jewish people and the believers. And so this is another one of those times, you know, throughout history we see where the believers began worshiping in synagogue with everybody else. They just accepted Yeshua as the Messiah of Israel, as Mashiach, as promised, as part of Judaism. And they felt no need to leave Judaism to go be something else because they saw faith in Yeshua as being consistent with Judaism, even temple Judaism. They went to the temple, they worshiped, they went there at the time of sacrifices, they made sacrifices. Paul made trips back to Jerusalem at the festivals and the feasts, the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage feasts. There's all this going on, so there was no need for there to be a separation. As time went on, we see a separation coming with really starts with persecution and then the destruction of the temple and then the establishment of what we know as Rabbinic Judaism, although it wasn't called Rabbinic Judaism at that time, but through the Council of Yavne, and then the codification of the Talmud comes years later, and all that becomes that way. And in the midst of all that, we see moments of separation when Jewish people that didn't believe in Yeshua and Jewish people that did believe in Yeshua kind of started to part ways. Initially, surprisingly enough, I know that this will be a surprise to many of you, the initial disagreement had nothing to do with theology or Yeshua. As far as the parting of ways, it had to do with taxes. It had to do with the fact that Jewish people paid extra money to Rome to be able to worship Judaism. It was an allowance they had that they paid a Jew tax, for lack of a better way to say it. And the non-Jewish people started to say, you know what, we're not Jewish. And they're not causing us a lot of problems because we're believers in Yeshua, so we'll just separate and form our own groups that aren't taxed by Rome. And so that's one of the initial separations. There were other disagreements over Yeshua. Clearly that is a real thing, and there was persecution, and we read about that. You know, Paul goes to Damascus because of the persecution of the believers and all that. But the big separation was not that. As a matter of fact, we know part of that because we ended up with a verse of the Amidah that was added to the Amida to called, it was a verse that deal with the Minim or the heretics, that they would recite. If you recited that, and the believers wouldn't recite it, so then they could identify who were believers to cast them out of the synagogue. So there's a process that goes on. But another process in Rome had to do with this, and this caused another separation because the Jewish people blamed the believers for being exiled out of Rome. And by the way, if you want to read a really good book about all this that takes place in that, Rabbi Jeffrey Seif wrote a book, I think it's called To the Ends of the Earth or something very similar to that, and he shares how that all takes place and all of the political and religious undertones of it. So I recommend reading that book to find out more about that. So that's what's happening in Rome, and here we have this group of believers, the Roman congregation, that has, like every other congregation except for Brit Am, started having problems. And so the letters that we read, like Romans, like Colossians, like Galatians, are all letters dealing with some kind of crisis or problem within the body. And in several letters, it's both. Romans is also unique, and it's not the only one, but it's unique in that it's written to both Jewish believers and non-Jewish believers. It's not written, for instance, directed at one group, and it's not written directed at a congregation. In other words, in our congregation, we have both Jews and non-Jews, and I preach to the congregation as a whole, dealing with the issues of the congregation as a whole. Romans deals with preaching directly at Jewish people in the congregation at times, directly at non-Jewish people at times, and at everybody at times. And so when we read it, we have to identify who it's being written to in order to be able to understand what's being said and keep it in the context. Because, and I've said this when I did the Galatian study and in my book, if I were writing a book to, if I was a dietitian and I wrote a book to people that were anorexic, and I wrote a book to people that were obese, the book to the obese people would say, if you don't stop eating so much, you're going to die. The book to the anorexics would say, if you don't start eating more and keeping food within your body, you're going to die. If I took both of those books and I just kind of did like shuffling cards and put them into one letter, and you read it without context of who each section was written to, you would wonder what kind of maniac is telling people to eat so they can live and to eat so, or not to eat so they don't die. And so when we look at the book of Romans, we have to look at it. Who's it written to? Is it written to Jewish believers or Jewish non-believers? Is it written to Gentile believers or Gentile non-believers? Or is it written to everybody? And there are different sections that are actually identified in the text who he's writing to. So those are some unique things about the book of Romans as we begin. And again, context rules our understanding. The book of Romans, as we begin, starts with this. Paul, a slave of Messiah Yeshua, called to be an emissary or a shaliach or a missionary, and set apart for the good news of God, which he announced beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. Now I'm going to go on a little bit, but I want to point out a couple of things. First, Paul refers to himself as a slave or a servant of Messiah. If anybody in the Bible, in the New Testament, had the right to think of himself as high, to use the word apostle in the sense that people use it today to get honor and glory and be referred to that way, to have, I've seen people where they walk into their service and they've got, people that are their armor bearers carrying their Bible and carrying their, and then they walk up and they set everything up for him, and he walks up in this big flourish as if, the presence of God just arrived in the place. And I'm not saying that to mock, I'm just saying that's a reality of how some in the Christian world look at apostles. If anybody had a right in the natural to think of himself that way, Rav Shaul would be one of those people. He was called of God. He was one of the smartest men in that time. He was a student of Gamaliel. He was a Jew's Jew. He was, as he says, as to the Torah, I'm found righteous. He kept the Torah perfectly. And now when I say that, and I'm going to get back to that in a second, remember I said he kept the Torah perfectly. But all of those things, he wrote much of the New Testament, all this stuff. He had a right to do that. But he refers to himself as a slave or a servant of Messiah Yeshua. The reason I bring this up is because if Paul thought of himself that way, how should we think of ourselves? How do we look at ourselves and our place in the kingdom? Are we looking for accolades or notoriety? Are we trying to be well known or well thought of or any of those things? Or are we looking at ourselves as a servant of Messiah? And when I say that, I mean, a servant, you can tell a servant, I need you to go do this. And then they come back when they're done with that, and you say, I need you to go do this, and they do that. It's not a question of, well, that's not my job or my calling or my role or this or that. So if, Hashem may call us, Yeshua may lead us to whatever goes on, do we see ourselves as above that? And if we do, we need to bring ourselves down a little bit or a lot of it, understanding that we're servants or slaves of Yeshua. He is our master. He is our Adonai, our Lord, my Lord, and that's important. He says, called to be an emissary. I already went over emissary or shaliach. He said, set apart for the good news of God. Now, set apart, what is that? What's the word for set apart in Hebrew? Kadosh means holy. Holy or set apart for the good news of God. And I'm going to talk more about the good news as we go through, but I want you to understand that the good news is probably not what most of us have been taught the good news is. It's a much more broad thing than what most of us say. So, which he announced beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. I love that Paul begins his letter by reminding us this isn't new. This is not something new. As a matter of fact, there's almost nothing new in the New Covenant. He says, the good news which was announced in the Tanakh. Not that he doesn't say the good news from the book of Romans or the book of Matthew or the book of Luke. He says the good news from his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. And this is important to note that when he says this, the only Holy Scriptures were the Tanakh. We're reading a book that's being written for what we call the Brit Chadashah, and most of the other books were written after this. So we're not talking about New Testament. When he says the Holy Scriptures, we're not talking about the prophets and the New Testament. We're talking about the Tanakh, the Torah, Ketuvim, and Nevi'im. Okay. Now I want to just say real quick when I talk about Paul being perfect as to the Torah, because it's important as we go through Romans, this concept is going to come back and back and back. That doesn't mean he didn't sin. What it meant is when he sinned, he did what was appropriate through Torah to deal with that sin. In other words, when you committed a sin, there was a sacrifice or an offering. There was something that you did that brought you back in alignment with Torah. And forgiveness in the Tanakh was the same as forgiveness in the Brit Chadashah. If you received forgiveness, you were back in line with God. You were once again holy. You were once again seen as righteous. So Paul isn't saying he never sinned, because that would be contrary to the words where he said, every time I try to do good, good is not found within me. I'm dragging a dead man around with me. He tells us of his struggles, but he also can say that according to the law, I'm blameless. That's the same thing we can say. If you're a believer in Yeshua and you follow God's plan and you confess your faults, then he forgives you and you are made blameless once again because you followed the provision of the instructions or the Torah that God gave us. So understand that concept. It's going to be brought back over and over, but Paul was blameless according to the Torah. And we can be too. Okay. Concerning his son, and let me read back through this, which he announced beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. Concerning his son, he came into being from the seed of David according to the flesh. So he's saying that the prophecy said he would be from the seed of David, and that's who he was. He was appointed Ben Elohim, or Son of God, in power, according to the Ruach of holiness, by the resurrection from the dead. He is Messiah, Yeshua, our Lord. He's establishing a couple of things here. One, he is the Messiah taught in the Tanakh. Number two, he was appointed the Son of God by the Spirit of God. It's not just Paul that said this. There's proof in the Ruach, proof of the prophecy being fulfilled, proof of the miraculous, proof of all of the things that were told. And remember, John the Immerser, when he was in prison, he sends his disciples to Yeshua and says, "Are you the one?" And Yeshua says, "Tell them these things. The blind see, the lame walk, the deaf hear, the dead are raised." And then he goes on to say, "Blessed is he who's not easily offended in me," which is probably one of the toughest verses to swallow, to take in the Bible. Because what Yeshua said was, yes, I am, you're still going to die. Yes, I'm the Messiah. And what he said that was that they were expecting the proofs by the power of God that these miracles would take place as proof of the Messiahship and the sonship of God. And remember, contrary to modern teaching, the Jewish people believed in a Son of God who would be the Prince of Peace, the Everlasting Father. You know, we read in Isaiah, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." So they were expecting the Son of God from Isaiah, the prophecy of the virgin bringing forth, of the Alma, the maiden bringing forth. There's a whole list of prophecies that show he would be the Son of God. But it was proof by the Ruach, not proof by just us saying so. We can say a lot of things. We can talk about getting healed. But if you don't have x-rays or you don't have documentation, you don't have proof. Now, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But if you have x-rays and you say, look, my arm was broken and this is the next day and it's not broken, it's signed by the same doctor at the same hospital, and I'm not either of those places, people can't argue with that. If people who knew me before I was a believer and then saw me after I became a believer and watched the differences, there's no way you can deny the miracle that took place in my life. And I'm sure you have the same kind of thing. So he's not saying he is the Son of God because I say so. Paul's not saying, I am Paul the Apostle. See me roar. Yeshua is the Son of God because I say so. He says he was appointed in power according to the Ruach, to the Spirit of God, of holiness. By the resurrection of the dead, he is Messiah, Yeshua, our Lord. And again, when you look at that in the Hebrew, he is Messiah, or our Redeemer, our Deliverer, our Anointed One, Yeshua, our salvation, and Adonai, our Lord. So it's a very powerful statement that's being made. It says, through him we have received grace and the office of emissary, or shaliach, or apostle, to bring about obedience of faith among all the nations on behalf of his name. Now, I want to point out a couple of things here, and I may spend a little time on this, because Paul makes a statement here that contradicts a lot of teachings that are around today. And so I want to try to walk through this a little slow. First of all, he says, through him we have received grace and the office of Shaliach. So he's saying, I wasn't appointed by just men. God called me, and it's through his grace, not through my will or my ability or my power, but that. He says, to bring about obedience of faith among the nations. Obedience to what? What is it that he's going to teach them obedience to? There is no New Testament. The only thing he can teach obedience to is the Torah and the teachings that came before. And he says, obedience of faith among the nations on behalf of his name. And remember, Yeshua said, I didn't come to do away with the law, but I came to bring it to fullness. He went to the nations to preach obedience because he had grace. He didn't go out of obedience to preach grace. And that's a huge difference. That doesn't mean that preaching Yeshua isn't grace. But Paul's message was obedience, which is contrary to what we hear today. Just believe, and that's all you have to do. Repeat this prayer after me, and you're saved no matter what you do. You have no responsibilities. You have nothing. He says, I was sent to the nations on behalf of his name to preach or bring about obedience of faith. Not just faith, but obedience of faith. There is an obligation he's sharing of a response to grace, which is obedience. And by the way, the reason he says grace and the office is because of grace, he was obedient and followed God to go do what he had to do. Grace causes obedience. It doesn't do away with it. God did not bring the New Testament to do away with the Old Testament. He didn't bring the New Testament and the Messiah so that we could be delivered from the Torah, or as some people are saying today, unhitch from the Old Testament. Messiah came so the Jewish people and the nations could be taught obedience of faith. And that is vital for us to understand. Faith is an action word. I think that's a verb in English. It requires doing something. We don't have faith. When we obey God, we're faithing. Okay, so that's important. Okay, going on. And you are also called to Yeshua the Messiah. To all those in Rome, loved by God, called to be Kedoshim, grace to you and shalom from God our Father and the Lord Yeshua the Messiah. Now, I want to point out a couple of things as we go through here. First of all, he's talking to these people and telling them that they're all called. That doesn't mean called like, hey, I want you to come over here. It means God has a purpose in your life and a purpose for your life and something for you to do. He said, I was called to be an emissary. You were called also. Again, faith-ing. Now, I want to be very clear. There's a lot of confusion about callings today. I have a calling to be a rabbi, but that's not my only calling. And God could change that tomorrow, and I could not be a rabbi anymore and be called to do something else. We have been taught somehow in our minds that we're called to a certain thing. Like you're called to be a worship leader, so that's all you're called to do. Well, no, you may be called to be a worship leader and an evangelist and a teacher. Or you may be called to be a teacher and an emissary or whatever. And that may change. You know, there's a lot of people that are, whoever's making all those dinging things, if you would turn whatever it is that's making it, okay. Okay, it really causes me to squirrel. So, which is now a verb. So, anyhow, You could be called to work in children's ministry, and then later on be called to work in nursing home ministry, and then later on be called to work in prison ministry, and later on be called to work with the homeless ministry, and somewhere else work with the hospice center, and you may be called to do all of that all at once. But calling isn't narrow. Calling means we're called to Him to do as servants whatever He wills. That's why when we talk about the gifts of the Spirit, it says severally as He wills. It's not about us, it's about servanthood. We're called into service. It's kind of like when I was in the Navy. I went in the Navy to be an AW. I was an anti-submarine warfare, aviation anti-submarine warfare operator. I flew around in airplanes looking for submarines. That was my job. And I had a thing on my arm. Had a little design that showed what my job was. Everybody could look at my arm and say, that guy's an AW. That didn't stop them from saying, here's a paintbrush. Paint this yellow so people don't trip over it. Or there's a garbage can. Go take out that garbage. Or I want you to sit at the desk and answer the phone until I get back. Because I had made myself a servant of the Navy. And although my job was one thing, I was a servant to do whatever somebody who was had more rank than I did told me to do. It's the same way in the kingdom. You didn't volunteer to the kingdom to one job. You volunteered to the kingdom to be a servant like Shaul. And that can change. Okay, and he goes to all those in Rome loved by God, called to be Kedoshim. Grace to you and shalom from God our Father and the Lord Yeshua the Messiah. This is one of the most important verses in the text. The book of Romans was written to believers in Rome. It was written to those in Rome, loved by God, called to be Kedoshim. Grace and shalom from God our Father, Lord Yeshua. Other places it would say to the church of Rome. Okay? These are believers, huh? Boom. Okay, so these are believers. The reason that's important is once we find out who a letter is written to, then we can apply it the way it's supposed to be applied to. For instance, when we get later on in Romans, where people go to find out how to be saved, not one of those words were written to tell people how to be saved. They were written to people who were already believers. It was establishing their faith, renewing it, advancing it, encouraging it, but it wasn't the get-in place. The get-in place is back in Acts. The get-in place is in the end of the Gospels. But this is written to believers in Rome. These are holy people, Kedoshim, saints, as it says in the English Bibles in most cases. That's important because when we look at Romans, we can't look at it as if Paul is writing to unbelievers and telling them how to be believers. He's writing to believers telling them how to be believers. How to live their lives, how to adopt, how to change, how to do things, which is contrary to how Romans is normally taught. Normally people say, you want to know how to get saved? Read Romans, the Roman Road. This is how you get saved, but that's written to people that are already saved. And so it's really important that we understand that. Romans 1:8, first I thank my God through Messiah Yeshua for all of you because your faithfulness is made known throughout the whole world. For God is my witness whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son, how unceasingly I make mention of you. Paul writes what I call love sandwiches. Most of Paul's books are written in the same kind of format. We know there's a problem. We know he's writing to them to fix a problem. You know, it's kind of like when your kids are messing up. the kids are throwing things all over the room and you go, stop throwing things from, you don't normally walk in and go, hey guys, I love you so much. I brag about you all the time. And then go through a whole introduction and then say, now, stop throwing things. But that's how Paul writes these letters. He always begins by saying, I love you and God loves you. He says, I thank God through Messiah for all of you. Now, I want you to notice he didn't just say, I thank God for you. As a rabbi, as somebody in ministry, if you've ever been in ministry, I thank God through Messiah for all of you. There are some people you just have to have God's strength to be thankful for. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying, and those people, kind of like callings, those people can shift around. There are times where somebody will be just a top-notch part of the congregation. They do everything right. You just love them. You can't wait for them to walk in the room. And then something happens in their world, and all of a sudden it's like, man, I hope they don't come. They bring the whole place down. We don't want them there. Everybody else is worshiping. They're sitting down there with the mully grubs. There's some people we can only love through the grace and working of the Holy Spirit until either they change or we change. So Paul is real here, and he's saying, I thank God through the Messiah for all of you. There's a filter between your behavior and my love. And that filter is Yeshua. And that's a reality that we need to learn. Because there's a lot of times we don't have that filter and we push people away when we really should be drawing them to us so that we can minister to them. So he says, my filter of my love is Messiah. Because your faithfulness is made known throughout the whole world. Now I want you to listen. Paul is being absolutely honest in saying that their faithfulness is made known throughout the world, while also knowing that he's writing them a letter because they've been unfaithful. Do you get that? Paul's writing this letter because there's problems, and we're going to get to the problems as we go through it. But because somebody has problems doesn't mean they're totally unfaithful. Otherwise, none of us would have a chance. We are faithful in some things, and we have unfaithfulness issues at times. We are victorious some days, and some days not. Paul says, some days I'm just dragging a dead body with me, And that's a reality. And we have to look at other people that way. And listen, this is especially important for Messianics because we deal with people both in the world and in Judaism and in the church. And there are Jewish people that are faithful and unfaithful. A lot of Jewish people celebrate Shabbat and the holy days, give tzedakah, do good works, do all kinds of things, and would make us look amateurish in our zeal to obey God, while at the same time they're unfaithful to the knowledge of Messiah. There are people in the church that, I've been to some churches that I just would love to have our synagogue worship with the enthusiasm of some people in church, with that unrestrained joy in worship, but not fake and not for show, but real. The same, I watch my grandkids. I'm learning so much again with grandkids. And you guys may get tired of me talking about them, but I'm not going to, so tough. Okay? I've learned a couple of things. I learned the difference between 6 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock at night. At 6 o'clock in the morning, my grandkids knock on my door, and they come in, and Pammy and I both go, "Come jump on the bed. Come snuggle with me. I want to hug you." At 8 o'clock at night, it's bedtime. Same kids, same love, difference. My grandkids, I get home, and they're, "Zaza." My grandson can't say Zeta yet, so he calls me Zaza. "Zaza," and he runs at me with unabashed. I want my wife to run at me with that kind of, "Eric, you're home, woo!" That's if my wife welcomed me home the way my grandson, I'd be like, "Woo, yeah." But, so it's real. It's not a put on, it's not a show, and I don't want my wife to watch this tonight and meet me at the door like, "Woo, Eric, you're home." But you get what I'm saying. It's real. It's my grandson. It's honest. It's heartfelt. He's excited that I'm home, and there's people that worship that way. They're just excited to be there, and I want our synagogue to have that enthusiasm and excitement and worship, but not just for show and not just so people see things. But the people in those churches have no clue about some of the observance and biblical commandments that we're commanded to follow. And some of them have been told not to do them. Faithful, unfaithful. So when Paul's writing this and he says, "Your faithfulness has been made known throughout the whole world," he's not lying, and he's not trying to make it to just make them feel better about themselves. He's being honest and saying that. And he says, "For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son, how unceasingly I make mention of you." And I can tell you from my limited experience, about half the conversations I have with other leaders is about you guys and the people that come to our congregations, and bragging about how God's doing things in your lives, and the changes and the miracles and things that go on. So that's what he's saying. He says, "Always pleading in my prayers, if somehow by God's will, now at last I'll be granted a good journey to come to you." And Paul's never been there. He's dealing with them and dealing with their issues as the emissary or a shaliach or an apostle, but he's not been there, and he's saying, "I really want to come. I really want to be there with you." He says, "For I long to see you, and so I may share with you some spiritual gifts to strengthen you." And again, I love the way Paul writes this. He doesn't say, "So I can straighten you out." He says, "I want to share some spiritual gift to strengthen you." It's kind of like when we read in the Brit Chadashah, it says, "And they taught in more excellent way." They didn't just say everything you're doing is wrong, and let me fix this. They start with where they are, and they say, "I have something to strengthen you, something to increase what you're doing." So that is to say, we would be encouraged together by one another's faithfulness, both yours and mine. And I love how Paul understands that concept that we can strengthen and encourage each other. I was talking this week, and it's something I'm really, every year at this season, the end of Sukkot, I start really seeking the Lord for what he would do, or what I feel like he would lead our congregation to over the next year, so that I'm leading instead of trying to push. And one of the things that's really on my heart, and I've reached out to other leaders, is mentoring, and really having a mentoring, not a relationship where I say, "Okay, Jerry, you and Jerry, you're going to connect and you're going to mentor," but ways in which we can bring people together so they can organically build relationships where they mentor each other. In other words, there's things that, this will surprise you, but Jerry could probably teach me something. He can't hear me right now, so I'm not sure whether... But, there's things that he could teach me, even though I'm a rabbi. And there's things I can teach him. Mentoring goes both directions. when I teach a group of people, I always learn more as I'm teaching than I did when I started, and I hope they learn also. So we're trying to do things like we want to get groups of men together, and women tend to do this better than men do. Women tend to naturally form flocks. No, I mean they if you put a group of women in a room, they're going to naturally form clusters. And that's not a bad thing, where they'll start talking to each other. And women will start sharing things almost immediately with people that don't even know them. I've gone to the store with my wife, which I try to never do, and she'll stand next to somebody in the grocery line and start sharing her life. And she shares it as if this person knows everybody in her world. And well, yeah, this person did this and this person did that and this is going on. I'm praying for this person. And they go right to deep conversation. Men generally don't do that. Hey, how you doing? Fine. End of conversation. An hour passes. Not a word gets said. I drive Pammy crazy. We get in the car. I can be quiet from here to Orlando. I don't need to say a word. I'm totally happy. Get in the car, drive. Every now and then I look over and say, "Are you okay?" Which is male for, "Do you have to stop?" And she'll say, "No." And then we'll pass the exit. And then she'll say, "Yes." Okay? So, but men have less of that. It takes us more time to get to a place where we open up about. So we want to do things like, we're going to get a group of men together that are going to go and help do repairs at homes for senior citizens, widows, single moms, things like that. So they'll spend time working together, and if they're spending time working together, they're going to have to talk. Like, "Hey, get me a hammer." "Hey, did I tell you my mom died?" So we can get into those conversations. And that's, believe it or not, that's how it happens. We don't have to lead up to things with long conversations. It's short to the point. We're going to do things like fishing trips or poker games or different things that just put us in a room together, and we figure eventually someone will say something. And once that happens, it'll open up and things happen. And it does, and I've seen it happen. We've had poker games where we play cards, and all of a sudden somebody says something, and then everybody talks. And then just a little bit later, they're talking about their kids and what they're going through, and how you can pray for me about this, and I heard so and so needs prayer for this, and it becomes much more relational. So we're wanting to do that so that we can. And then my hope is that as that happens, we'll start to organically build mentoring relationships where we start learning from each other and sharing from each other and sharing, I was victorious over this in my life, and here's how I did that, and helping each other. So that's something that Paul is really positive about, and he says he's talking to people that he's going to go correct. This whole letter is about correction, and he says, I want to encourage each other. It's not speaking down to people. And by the way, we need to stop that. We tend to do that. We tend to talk to people, especially people in the church, as if we're in heaven and they're on the earth. And if they would just get like us, they could come to heaven too. And that's not. We need to learn from each other's faithfulness, not each other's unfaithfulness. Okay. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters. By the way, it says brothers and sisters here. In the Greek word for that, it would be translated brethren. So if you have a Bible other than the TLV, and it'll say brothers or brethren. But those in languages, most languages, when you're talking about a group of people that are both male and female, you speak in the masculine. So it's talking to both brothers and sisters. The brothers and sisters, that many times I planned to come to you, though I was prevented until now, so I might have some fruit among you also, just as I have among the rest of the nations. Paul's just saying, I want to be involved with you guys. I want to, I want to see fruit of my efforts with you, just like I see other places. And that's not bragging. That's a desire to be a blessing to others. I have an obligation to both Greeks and barbarians, to both the wise and the foolish. I love that. Greeks and barbarians, to both wise and foolish. I love that he just is upfront about it. He doesn't mince words. He doesn't water things down. I got in conversation with somebody, and it doesn't matter who it is, but I offended them this week. I know that's a shock that I would offend somebody, but they said something, and I was very straightforward with them in response to their statement, because I thought not only were they wrong, but they were wrong to the point of promoting something that I felt was wrong. And they were offended. They said I was rude. And I really wasn't rude. I was just straightforward. And I explained to them. I said, look, you're a peer. When I talk to a peer, I don't water things down. I expect that if you're a peer, that I can speak to you straight and you'll speak to me straight. And they said, but I would think that you would treat someone you know nicer than that. And I said, no, you got this wrong. I treat people I don't know with kid gloves. People that I know and that are believers, I don't hold back when they say something like that. I tell them what the Bible says. I share opinion. And then if I'm wrong, I expect you to share back and say, no, this is why, and this is what it is, and we have a dialogue, but it doesn't have to be watered down and weakened to the point where it's, where it's pablum. I don't think that should be what we should do. And Paul does the same thing. He says, I have an obligation to Greeks and barbarians, the wise and the foolish. I have an obligation to teach everybody. So I'm eager to proclaim the good news to you who are in Rome. By the way, did you see what he did? He said, I have to go to Greeks, barbarians, wise and foolish, so I'm coming to you. Again, just feel. Okay. It says, so I'm eager to proclaim the good news also to you who are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the good news, for it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who trusts, to the Jew first and also the Greek. And by the way, the Greek there, where it says also, really means equally to. The Jew first and equally to the Greek. Not like to the Jew first, then I'm done with them, and then it's the Greek's turn. Which is how this has been translated and taught. God came to the Jews, they rejected Yeshua, and went to the Greeks. I go to the Jews, they throw me out the synagogue, then I go to the Gentiles. That's not what he's saying. He's saying to the Jew first and equally the Greek, but it's to the Jew first and then the Greek. That's the reason why Jonathan Bernis's events in Russia were so powerful in what they did, because he would announce, we're going to have a festival of Jewish music and dance. And then Jewish people would come, and then non-Jewish people would come by the thousands because they were interested in finding out what's Jewish music and dance. But if he had said, we're coming to just share the Yeshua the Messiah, then only Gentiles would have came. He wouldn't have been able to go to the Jew first, but if you go to the Jew, the Gentiles come in. It's the same way in our synagogue. We have a fairly traditional Jewish service, but we really don't have a problem getting non-Jewish people to come and worship with us. We do Hebrew liturgy, we read from the Torah, we do those things, and non-Jewish people feel mostly welcome with us. They may not agree with us, and they may leave because of other reasons, but they don't feel like they can't be part of what we are. It says, in it the righteousness of God is revealed from trust to trust, as it is written, but the righteous shall live by emunah, or by faith. Trust to trust could actually be trusting to trusting. In other words, again, it's active. It's not, I trusted and then I trust again, but I'm trusting, and that leads me to further trusting. And I believe that puts us right at about 7:30. So I'm going to stop there. We're going to begin next week with this verse, because I want to go deeper into the good news and what that actually is biblically. the whole of it, the fullness of it, instead of just a little bit that we tend to share when we say, what is the good news? We just rattle off a verse or two, but it's a much more broad thing and much more powerful thing. And it's something that really, if we get a glimpse of and we start to process it, will change our lives completely. So that's where we're going to stop tonight. We're going to continue on next week with Romans 1:16 and from there on. So thank you so much for coming. Those that are watching online, if you haven't already shared it, please share it so that other people can participate in this. And if you're able to, come be with us on Shabbat for George and Rivka Witten from Israel. And also, if you're ever in the area, if you're not local, you can come and be with us when you're on vacation. Please, those that are in the house, remember there's bread in the back. It needs to go home in you or with you. So please bring it home. If you don't need all of it, you have neighbors that do. Please bring it and share it. Demonstrate active love. Amen? Thank you and shalom.